Mm. Anyways, all right. We'll call this the official start because I don't like to do an official start, but I feel like we should have an official start for several reasons. Number one, this is kind of my first YouTube podcast talking to somebody other than my son, something for kids or about kids. Also, we redid the studio office and I have the curtains pulled back so you see all these personal pictures like my little brother flipping the bird. Well, this guy is responsible for most of those pictures. So I don't need to name you by last name, but this is my childhood friend Drew. For those of you who that are watching or interested, we've been through it. We've done it all together. We've done the good, the bad, and everything in between. And I figured, we've been chatting and catching up, and I said, why don't we do a podcast? It'd be enlightening for people, to say the least, I think for people to hear about, I don't know, your background, my background, where we are now, the different stories, the stories are in between. Luckily for you and for the people, it's only going to be about 30 minutes because I'm doing just a Zoom meeting and I didn't pay for the service. So we got 30 minutes to do it and then we need a follow-up episode. So without further ado, Drew, welcome to MC on the mic. My kid will probably pop in here at some point because, it's kind of his world and his podcast, but I feel like all the discussions, all of the memories, I mean, not all of the memories, but a lot of the memories and a lot of the things that have gone on in our life are worthy of a TV show, a movie, a podcast, or a highlight reel of some sort. Let's just talk about where you are today. I know you're at one of your guys' garages, right? Something that you manage. What is it? Tell me about it.
Yeah, I'm at a warehouse that we store a bunch of cars at. Have a little office here over by the airport down in Fort Lauderdale. Um,
Born and raised Floridian. We were both born and raised Florida kids, and now Florida seems to be like the destination of destinations for people. But coming up in our time, things were certainly different than they are now, no doubt about it. Just as exciting, just on a different scale. How grateful are you to have come up in Florida the way that you did, with the influences that you did? Just because where you are right now, like you're a successful young fella, but you've been
Extremely
through some stuff,
grateful.
you've seen some stuff, and you got some wild friends.
I mean, it's definitely changed over the years. I mean, it's a different ball game here. It's really crowded, but being on the water and you know, getting to continue experience that we did as childs is amazing. You
Yeah.
know, to see my house that I grew up in and just to kind of be in that area is awesome. But it's a changing landscape to say the least.
But you had such a cool, like, you and I both had interesting childhoods, kind of upbringing. You kind of on the east side of the east coast of Florida, me on the west side of the east coast of Florida, if that doesn't break your brain. But talk a little bit about like your everyday, the stuff that you introduced me to. So we went to kindergarten together and so on and so forth, pretty much through graduation. We separated at different high schools, but we saw each other every day. But you lived on the intercoastal, you lived near the water. I knew about race cars, you knew about boats. So you knew about race cars for the water, I knew about race
Did
cars for
everything
land.
on land and I did everything on water.
Yeah. And so like I'd come to your house and like you got me to get like a boating license. You taught me everything I know about boats. And like who taught you about boating and how young did you kind of get into it? Because Macklin's 8. I feel like he's right around the corner for it.
So I was on my dad's sailboat at 2.5 weeks old, and then
That's since birth, basically.
so yeah, and my father still sails the Bahamas for 12 weeks a year. I think he's going on 45 years doing this same route that he's been doing, circling the Bahamas on his sailboat. But as kids, my brother and I, were raised in that atmosphere, and we learned how to sail a sailboat and chart a course before there were GPS. And when you know every little decision meant were big things, because we were on a boat that was moving 6 knots, which is maybe 7 miles an hour. And if you're crossing a shipping lane of a cargo tanker that's going 20 knots or 24 miles an hour, so you can't get out of the way and they're not going to see you. So my dad taught us as kids at a very young age certain navigational skills and certain things about, living and being on the water nonstop that, has helped me today as a boat captain. But, just simple things of, celestial navigation or taking
Oh,
a
wait,
hand.
wait a minute. That sounds like something that the aliens do. Like, are we talking stars, like celestial navigation? What are we talking
So
about?
when my
Flight of the
dad,
Navigator? Where are you
so
going?
when my dad started sailing,
Tilt your camera down a little bit. You got all that headspace above you. Or unless you lean up like that. Yeah, but if you
when
lean
my
back,
dad started sailing, he used a device that had different color lenses, and you could use it staring at the sun or the stars, and it would tell you basically like a GPS would. They call it a sextant.
by by a colored, like something
Yes,
opaque
you
that
would
you can
use
look at.
different colored lenses, and it was kind of like a mathematical thing where it would take distance from the horizon and the sun, and you would find your position that way.
But now we have
And
iPhones, so we don't need that anymore.
nope. And then, then one of the things was, when you saw other boats, we would always have a handheld compass, and what you do is you take a bearing. So you would, as you're traveling this way and you see a boat off to your side, you would take a bearing and see, which, so say if I'm looking at you, that's 0.
Yeah,
And I take, say, a 90 degree, he's bearing off 90 degrees. So I look 90 degrees, and then I'll set my watch for 5 minutes or so. Then I'll take another bearing of where that boat is, and then you can see if it's increasing or decreasing and figure out if you're on a collision course or not.
gotcha.
Nowadays, they use something called AIS, which larger boats, but most of them now, they broadcast their name, their location, where they're going. So, nowadays I can look on our GPS screens, or MFDs, they call them, and I can get on the radio and call that boat and say, which direction, or, you know, do you want me to,
Yeah, communicate with them.
starboard, port to port, or communicate. I mean, I was coming in Monday, and and it was just over the radio, but I had a like 120-foot boat approaching, but he wanted to kind of cut in front of me, and I was coming under 17th Street, and he just radioed me, and I slowed down, kind of held traffic for him, let him kind of pass. So things have changed, but I got a lot of good practice and good lessons, as a kid.
Is there a lot of like that courtesy amongst boaters? I always felt like that was like a thing, like boaters looked out for boaters. Is that a sense of how it is, or is it not so much?
Maybe in some circles, but I feel there's a lot of inexperienced boaters.
Yeah,
Um,
that's an issue. That's an
and
issue in everything, though, right? It's always the inexperienced people that think they have more experience or more know-how than they do that makes things
yeah,
complicated.
I'm sure everybody's seen Qualified Captain.
Qualified captain?
Yeah, have you seen that?
No, what is that?
It's an Instagram page, but it's basically people go around, and when they see someone doing something that's stupid, to say, or
Yes.
just not intelligent, they would post, what they're doing, and hashtag Qualified Captain.
Have you seen the Instagram? I follow this Instagram called Only in Florida. Do you follow that one?
Only in Broward.
There's so many good
In
Florida
Dade.
Instagrams. Obviously, what's his name? Florida Man started it all. There's a Florida Man series now on Netflix
I watched it.
with one of my favorite actors of all time, Edgar Ramirez, who
Yep.
is
Actually, I
he's
liked it. It was pretty good. They did a lot of shooting in a lot of places I was familiar with, between
oh,
Orlando,
really? I haven't seen it. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
New Smyrna Beach, South Florida.
That's awesome. Yeah, we got to bring a movie back. At some point in my career, I have to do something either directed or acted by myself in Florida. Like it's gotta be a bring it home dream. Um, there's so many tales and there's so many wild tales and stories. The way we lived, the things we did, the accidental circumstances we survived, and so many of those just crazy nighttime boating, dirt bikes, go-karts, so many things like that. I was looking through pictures earlier, and there's a picture of you with a broken arm. We're in a my two-seater go-kart, and for anybody watching or listening, I had a go-kart that I was gifted when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I was too young to drive it, a real go-kart with a 5 horsepower engine on it, but it sat until I got older and I never used it. And then I was in school and we hung on to it, needless to say. And so flash forward, I mean, Drew and I are probably, I mean, it was before we were driving. So it was like 13,
Yep.
14,
Well,
somewhere in there.
yeah.
And my dad moves into a new house, and in the new house, there's a shed, and in that shed, somebody left like a small old, I think it was like a wood chopper engine. And anyways, the picture is you with a broken arm. I think you were driving, and then I'm reaching behind because I remember there was no like throttle cable, and I have the throttle wide open with my thumb, and you're driving like with one arm because your one arm's in a cast. And I thought that picture is worthy of a movie. Like if
Yeah.
I can't make some sort of like Sandlot meets the Goonies movie about Florida and our childhood of chaos between our circle of friends, friends that we've lost, friends that we're not friends with, like all encompassing the if we could bring all these minds and stories together, I'm telling you, it would be a wild tale of youthful adventure that people would love to watch. I mean, it's truly, I know everybody has an interesting childhood, but coming up in Florida, just what Florida is and what it stands for is just, I mean, it's really chaos. It's really chaos.
It is. It really is.
I mean, the
And
parties and the dangerous things we did without getting hurt. And I don't mean like all out, like, like just like
I mean,
the drinking and partying side of it, but like just the wild situations, you know, like you would have like these boat island parties and then you'd have these park parties, all this crazy stuff.
well, I mean, I was on the boat the other day, and I mean, I forget who I was talking to, but I was like, we used to do this at night, and with our Robalo and go tubing at night, and I think I remember you falling off, being like 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and we're doing donuts in the middle of the intercoastal, and skiing and tubing, and
Yeah. Wild times. I mean, wild times. I'm glad I lived them. I'm even more glad that I survived them. But I feel like cinematically it should be on a big giant screen if people should be taking that ride with us. I mean, I think the more you and I talk, and as we're like talking about the next step in our lives, whatever it is, like opening something together, buying property together, whatever the thing is we do, like we got to hang on to the stories without forgetting them. And a great way to hang on to stories is make movies out of them, obviously. So, um, I think we should, focus on our stories and moving forward, like the wilder. I think wild movies are coming back. I feel like wild movies faded out a little for a little while, kind of for the last 5, 8 years. Like those real wild, truthful, uncomfortable comedies and action movies. And I think cinema is going to make a massive, massive comeback. And obviously, I want to drive people to the movie theaters, but I just think fun, wild movies are what people want to see. You know?
I think we should maybe review some of our old videos we used to make. Get some.
Yeah, that's the secret footage. That's the secret footage, the vault. I mean, we have videos. I told you I took some of our old videos the other day and I had them put on DVD and there were ones of us. So I think you were on, I had it was like an XR 100 and we had a CR 80 that we used to drive around together for a while. I think those were the bikes. Anyways, we're like in the mud, back in the woods. Like I got no shirt on, no surprise there, but like I got like my hat
Oh, that was so much
sideways,
fun.
no helmet, just being ridiculous. Do you remember like when we would go like back towards where Elliot lived? We'd go back towards his neighborhood on four-wheelers and just get so muddy,
Yeah.
like beyond muddy, like Navy SEAL, I'm hiding, Black Ops.
Yeah. Then we like I used to hide in the mud.
Dude, that was such a like why do you never see scenes like that in movies? That's my point. Why is there never a scene in a movie where there's a awesome nighttime boating tubing scene where it's crazy and it feels scary because it's nighttime, it's in the water, but it also feels exciting because it's nighttime in the water, you're on a tube, and the moment is joyful, and like just the same thing. Like why is there not that imagery of like just a kid's face in the mud and you just see him pop open his eyes and you're like, oh, is his face? Is his buddy gonna run over and run him over in the four-wheeler? No, he's gonna jump up and spear his buddy off the four-wheeler. These scenes need to be
Did
told.
I? We did.
That's exactly what we did. I'm telling you, our lives make great stories, and they always say, write what you know. You have to write what you know or write what you've experienced or, whatever like that. And I mean, look, we have great experiences. We got to make movies out of them. I think it starts with conversations and communications, and then, make something wild. But I can picture it. The more I look at you, the more we sit down and we kind of, we do these catch up moments and we start talking about the past and what we're going through. I just remember all the great times we had. Like we were talking about the trampoline days, right? Just being on a trampoline outside for hours or jumping in your pool and then
Skate
jumping in
ramp,
the intercoastal and what's it called? The boat, the Fairy Queen,
the Jungle Queen.
Jungle Queen, Jungle Queen boat, and just like all that stuff and eating what I thought at the time. Shout out to Subway for giving me mixed
Crab special.
crab special seafood sub that made a young boy like me
Oh,
thinking I was eating the finest like seafood ever, just because you got to eat it next to the intercoastal water, so you felt like it was good seafood. So shout out to Subway. But anyways, the wild childhood that we lived is a tale that I have to tell at some point. And now, how would you, if you had to put a label on what you do as a profession, business manager, wealth, like what would you put a
I think
title on?
nowadays, more so boat captain than anything.
That's what I like. Okay, I like that. That's how I always pictured you. And if I could describe you, the main characteristic that you brought into my life, it would be boating. And so boat captain is right. But what you're captaining these days, what's that boat you were on yesterday, you were showing me about?
It's a 53-foot power catamaran made by Leopard.
A 53-foot leopard power catamaran. That's a mouthful to say, but boy, what an unbelievable boat. I was talking to my writing partner this morning, Lee, who is a Detroit, Michigan guy, but he has a lake house there. And they have like a big pontoon kind of houseboat thing, they go out on. It's like a big deck, basically. So just a smaller version of what you have. But I was telling him about that boat, and I was like, this boat's amazing. It's like as wide as it is long. It really is like driving a city block. And so you were telling me you captained it 50 times or something?
Yeah, quite a few. Before we took delivery of the boat, I rented and chartered the exact same boat with 8 people and went down to the British Virgin Islands and spent 8, 9 days down there, kind of test driving it a little bit, getting used to it.
And have you ever gone down there, made that boat trip before on any other boat to the
No,
BP?
that was my first time.
Oh, wow. Interesting. And so when you do something like that, do you get a co-captain or an assistant captain, or
You
how does that
can,
work?
you can, if you qualify, I mean, you go through kind of the people that charter it to you, it's called a bareboat charter. They kind of have to go through your qualifications, see if you're knowledgeable enough to captain a vessel of that size and safely. If you are, then they'll charter it to you, you know, as a bareboat, just give you the boat. But if not, you can always, they have the option to hire somebody and hire a first mate and, let it be a little bit more kind of hands off than hands on.
Hmm.
But, you know, I had a good crew with me and, after about 5 minutes behind the wheel, I got the hang of the boat and, it was kind of downhill ever since.
Was it I mean, it must have been amazing. You and I have driven so many cool things, our life, motorcycles, cars, boats, but it must have been amazing driving something. I don't want to just say large because you've driven like other big things, sailboats and other boats, but like just it's such a like a unique shape thing, and to
Sure.
have power of that, right? Like to be controlling it. And I
Like
know I
driving a
know
condo on the water.
and I know the technology, right? The engine and the I want to say the drivetrain, although I don't know if you have a drivetrain, but it is it responsive? Like when you want it to go, does it go?
I mean, the thing about boats is this: the bigger the boat, the the more momentum they have, the heavier they are, and the harder they are to stop. So
Gotcha.
the bigger you go, you're more cautious and have to take things slower and slower and slower. You know,
Got
like and that's why you see cruise ships and tug and these big boats that come through the port. They don't they have a tugboat and a harbor pilot come and they will pull the boat and direct it, because they can have two boats on either two tugboats and they can spin it. I mean, just going through the canal, if it's a large, 150-foot yacht going through the intercoastal, 99% of the time, those boats are being driven and controlled by other boats
Huh.
just because they're so big and they don't have that maneuverability.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's there becomes a size that becomes so big that, you know, it's really your only control is in big open water. Luckily, this isn't that size boat. So, you do have some control. It is very wide. So, I mean, you do take up a lot of the channel. So you got to be
Gotcha.
mindful, with other boats. But um,
But it's not very deep, right? The boat's only a couple feet deep.
yeah, it's only 3.5 feet deep. The giraffe, they call it.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, but I'm fascinated by boats. I'm always fascinated by the big boats too. Like when they bring these cruise ships and these cargo ships into harbor. I mean, it is just so cool to watch, and it's such a time-consuming process, and takes so many hands on deck to dock a giant boat. It is insane.
But when you do it right, it's a great feeling, right? When we were coming in to dock at the BVI's, um, we got hit with a little storm, a little squall, and so it was blowing pretty good, 30, 40 mile an hour gust. And the dock master there wanted me to dock the boat, and you got to reverse it in, to a slip that's next to another big catamaran, and you got to turn it around completely, in between aisles of catamarans. So I'm doing this with this storm, and this is at the end of the trip, so I've had 8 days now to practice with this boat, and I did it just perfect. And after, maneuvering this, big boat and spinning it around and pulling it in between a dock and another boat that might have had a foot on either side, if that, with wind and everything else, and after successfully doing it, to me, that was kind of a big accomplishment, and, felt really good. And it's a once you get a hang of it, it's a big joy to drive.
But here's a question. Like anything that excites us and feels good to accomplish sometimes can make us nervous to start, right? Like a fighter knows he wants to get in the fight and win the fight, but he's nervous walking out. I feel nerves when I'm doing an acting thing. So not so much with the directing, but more, if I'm hosting something until you get going, right? Do you feel that when you start boating? Like when you know you're about to take some people out or you're about to,
Sure,
park
yeah.
in a tight spot?
Like, I mean, if I'm doing a big trip or something, if I'm going to the Bahamas, like the night before, usually I can't sleep.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm running through checklist in my head, fuel, water, safety, trying to think about the weather and everything like that. So yeah,
Sure.
it's there's definitely some nerves, and and then once you kind of get going, everything's good, and you know you're smooth sailing, so to say. I mean, it's a relief, but yeah, I mean, there's always a little bit of nerves.
Yeah, and you know what? I like that because it's always those things that you kind of feel nervous about, and then you kind of push through because you want to accomplish that thing. Those are usually the things that kind of make us feel best in life because it's a challenge, it's an obstacle, and you have to take the obstacle, right? The obstacle is the way and all that stuff. And anything you want, You know, I feel like anything you really want in life kind of makes you feel that way. You're a little nervous, you're a little jittery, you have some butterflies, but if you want it bad enough, you go and do it because your happiness is tends to be on the other side of some sort of challenge like that, you know?
I agree. I agree completely. You know,
I mean, boating and being on the water, I know is so therapeutic. And so the combination of having not an addiction, but like a fixation on driving and being a better captain on different vessels, on different boats, having that fascination with it, I can only imagine is super healthy, you know, super healthy for your body inside, right? When you're on a
sure.
boat and you feel that happiness, that's because your body's doing all the things it wants to be doing, you know?
And it's probably a big reason why my dad decides to, live on his for as long as he does.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, just the view or sound of water, even if you're walking by a pool, it kind of something, you know, you always feel something about the water. It's like a fire. Like if you see a fire at night, you can't help but be like, duh, you're like staring off into a daze immediately. It's the same thing. I think the water, the sound or feeling of water kind of massages your soul for some reason. It's really, I wonder deep, 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 what's the connection? Um, to that, what is it? Obviously we're in the womb and water and this and that, but like it really has an effect on you, you
I mean,
know?
I just remember as a kid, we'd go on, take it, a sailboat that was going so slow, everywhere was, every day it was an 8-hour trip somewhere. So you're constantly just cruising along. But as a kid, I remember just kind of, I'd either go up to the bow and I had this little spot next to this where it's called the jib, and I would put these cushions down and I would lay there, and you're kind of overhanging the bow of the boat, but you could stare down, as the boat's kind of cutting through the water, dolphin would kind of swim up and just go with the boat, and, or you'd fall asleep, and, it's just that kind of just slow rocking back and forth. And it's
Peace.
super enjoyable. And, years later, you get to experience that again, and it's, it just kind of brings back that, joyful, happy memories. And yeah, it's relaxing. It's nice. I mean,
I mean,
it's
you've been a dependent on water your whole life for sure, for your sanity. Like I've never known you not on some sort of boat or in some sort of body of water in 40 years that I've known you now.
sure.
Like it's water has always been in your life. I mean, you've brought it into my life from, you know, teaching me how to hold on, let me shut this thing. Says we're running out of time, so I guess we got to bring it to an end. Oh no, we have like 10 minutes left. But you brought not only boating into my life, but you taught me how to wakeboard, you taught me how to kneeboard, you taught me how to drive like what is it, a dinghy?
Whole outboard with a tiller.
Yeah, that, type of thing. I taught you how to put motors on go-karts. You taught me how to survive on the water. And I'm not only am I grateful, but imagine now that I'm a parent, I think like, oh boy, I'd be terrified for Macklin to be 8 or 10 years old running around with his buddy on the intercoastal. But I'm so grateful that I was in good hands. Now that I made
Sure.
it to 40, my dad can say, wow, wow, that guy Drew actually took care of my son, actually looked out for my son, actually kept him safe on the water. And your dad can actually say the same thing, right? Like, I let those kids run wild and do this and that, but look, they looked out for each other because they're both 40 and they're, still talking about the good times and the good times they're going to create. So that's kind of shout out to the dads. I hope the dads watch this episode. High
Yeah.
five, high five each other.
Yeah, right.
Um, our dads kind of, we're in both of our lives, your dad and your mom and my dad in your life. And, everything in between, man. It's just, it's wild when you get to this point, right? Where it's just like we're a couple of 40-year-old dudes now, still with the young minds. Like I have my like 18-year-old mind that's still like, I can ride wheelies down the street right now. And then one Sunday I wake up and I go skipping with my son and pop an Achilles outside. You know what I'm saying? Like I wish, what's the saying? I wish I knew the good old days were the good old days when you were in the good old days, you know?
Yep. Yep. No, I agree. I mean, I remember being on the sailboat, over the summertime, and we didn't have phones back then, and thinking like, man, I'm stuck on this sailboat for, a month at a time, and oh, my friends are, doing all this other stuff. I didn't know what they were doing, and I wanted to, be able to connect with them. And nowadays it's like, man, if I could only go back.
If you can only go back. Yeah. I'm starting to look at that two ways, right? I'm looking at it like if you could only go back, it would be amazing because you could relive those memories. You wouldn't be able to change anything because it would take this moment away right now. Because if you change anything, it changes everything. But why, like our current conversations, you and I have been connecting over the last couple of days. And so like our current conversations, why can't we just recreate and continue to make memories that we want to make? Now more than ever, we have the ability to do it. So maybe we lack the kind of like that naive enthusiasm that it is of a young person going into the wakeboard situation for the first time, or the nighttime tubing or whatever. But we're 40, so we're a little smarter. We have a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more money. And so we can make the thing, like we can make it happen for ourselves. And that's what I think, it's about, is continuing to figure out how to make the memories you want to make. You can buy stuff, right? Like you buy cool stuff. Oh, I got a new phone, or I got a new this or that. And like, but it's about these
Not the
memories.
satisfaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just about the memories being made and stuff. I feel like we gotta figure out a way to be silly.
Less thinking and more doing.
Yeah, less thinking for sure. All right, here's to less thinking, here's to more doing, here's to our first kind of podcast with an adult other than my son. It's been awesome. I think we should do more. I think next time you're on the boat, like I'd love to have some behind the scenes footage of the boat that we can incorporate and
Sure.
kind of talk about, just because it's so incredible. So down the line, or whenever you're free and I'm free, which we seem to have some free time these days, we should hop back on and talk more about whatever. Um, I guess that's it. I was going to give like a shout out to your Instagram and stuff, but do you care about any of that stuff or no? No. This is Captain Drew signing off, along with his always faithful partner in crime, his Robin. I'm his sidekick to the captain, MC on the mic, and we'll see you again. We'll do this more. We'll tell more stories. This was kind of fun. 30 minutes.
Like
We could go longer, but next time. All right.
sounds good.
All right. Over and out. I'm gonna sign off.
Peace.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.